Somewhere on the internet right now, someone is reading a post that says something like this. I started a newsletter 18 months ago. Today it has 4,000 paid subscribers at $7 a month. That's over $300,000 a year from an email. No employees, no inventory, no rent, no factory, no delivery van, no landlord. Just words sent to inboxes on a platform that takes care of the payments for you. It's arguably the closest thing to a business with zero physical overhead that regular people can actually start today. Here's what those posts almost never mention. For every newsletter making six figures, there are thousands sitting at 12 free subscribers and $40 a month in paid revenue, run by someone spending 15 hours a week writing content nobody's reading. The economics of this business are real. Some newsletters genuinely do print money, but the gap between the ones that work and the ones that don't has almost nothing to do with writing quality, and everything to do with a handful of unglamorous numbers that never make it into the success story. Let's go through them. Let's get the obvious part out of the way first. Starting a newsletter costs almost nothing. Most platforms let you publish for free, only taking a cut once you actually start charging subscribers. Typically around 10% of subscription revenue plus standard payment processing fees on top of that. There's no equipment to buy, no lease to sign, no inventory to manage. You could start one this afternoon with a laptop you already own. This sounds like the ultimate advantage, and in one sense it is. But it's also exactly why this is one of the most crowded, low-barrier businesses on the internet right now. When the cost of entry is close to zero, an enormous number of people enter, which means the real competition isn't the platform's fee structure. It's the attention of a reader who already has 40 other newsletters sitting unread in their inbox. The $0 startup cost doesn't make this an easy business. It makes it a business where the actual cost shows up somewhere else entirely, in time and in the brutal difficulty of getting anyone to notice you exist. Here's where the fantasy usually breaks down first. People picture the total subscriber count and skip past two much smaller numbers that actually determine whether this works. The first is the free-to-paid conversion rate. Industry data on newsletter platforms consistently shows that a healthy conversion rate, the percentage of free subscribers who actually decide to pay, sits somewhere around 5 to 10% for a genuinely engaged audience. That means a newsletter with 1,000 free subscribers, which already sounds like a real accomplishment, might convert somewhere between 50 and 100 of them into paying subscribers. The second number is churn. How many paying subscribers cancel every month? Even well-run newsletters typically see a few percent of paying subscribers churn out monthly, meaning a newsletter isn't just trying to add subscribers, it's constantly replacing subscribers who quietly leave, just to stay flat. Put those two numbers together and the math looks very different from the headline story. Getting to even a modest few hundred paying subscribers at a common price point of $5 to $10 a month typically requires a free subscriber base in the tens of thousands, which is itself an audience-building achievement most people drastically underestimate the difficulty of reaching. This is the cost that almost never appears in a newsletter income screenshot. The actual hours it takes to produce content, people are willing to pay for week after week, indefinitely. A genuinely well-researched newsletter post, one with original analysis, checked facts, and writing that doesn't read like it was rushed, commonly takes anywhere from 5 to 15 hours to produce, depending on depth and topic. Do that weekly, and you're looking at a part-time job's worth of hours before a single subscriber has paid a cent, sustained for months before the audience is large enough for the paid tier to mean anything financially. And unlike a lot of businesses in this series, there's no clean way to outsource the part that actually matters. You can hire an editor, you can hire someone to manage social promotion, but the core product, the specific voice, judgment, and expertise that makes someone want to pay for your particular take instead of reading something free elsewhere, is very hard to hand off to someone else without the newsletter quietly becoming a different, less distinctive thing. This is the same pattern from earlier in this series, just wearing a different costume. The product on the surface, the newsletter itself, isn't really the constraint. The constraint is the enormous, largely unpaid time investment required to build an audience willing to pay for it in the first place. Here's something that surprises a lot of new newsletter writers. The newsletter platform itself is rarely where new subscribers actually come from. Most growth comes from somewhere else. An existing audience on another platform, guest appearances in other newsletters, being recommended by other writers in a similar niche, or word of mouth from readers who share a specific post. Organic discovery directly through a newsletter platform's own recommendation features exists, but it's a small and unpredictable slice of most writers' actual growth, not a reliable engine on its own. This creates an uncomfortable dependency. Most successful newsletter writers didn't build their audience by writing in isolation and waiting to be discovered. They built an audience somewhere else first, a social media following, a podcast, a YouTube channel, and used the newsletter as a monetization layer on top of an audience they'd already built through a completely different and often much more labor-intensive channel. In other words, for a lot of successful newsletters, the newsletter isn't really the business. It's the highest margin final step of a much bigger content operation that started somewhere else entirely. Newsletter platforms are pitched heavily on the idea that you own your audience. Unlike social media, where an algorithm decides who sees your content, your subscriber list is supposedly yours, portable and permanent. That's true in a narrow, technical sense. You can typically export your email list and move it elsewhere. But in practice, a meaningful share of your revenue is quietly flowing to the platform every single month through that subscription fee, and payment processing companies take their own cut on top of that. On a modest newsletter charging $7 a month, a combination of platform and payment processing fees can take a genuinely significant bite out of gross revenue before the writer sees a cent. And owning your list doesn't mean readers actually open your emails. Email deliverability, whether your content lands in an inbox instead of a spam or promotions folder, is its own quiet, ongoing technical problem, one that most writers don't think about until open rates mysteriously start declining and they have no clear answer why. Let's run the numbers on a newsletter that most people would consider a legitimate, respectable win. Not a viral outlier, just solidly working. Say a writer builds a free list of 20,000 subscribers over a couple of years of consistent weekly writing. At a healthy 7% conversion rate, that's roughly 1,400 paying subscribers. At $8 a month, that's just over $11,000 a month in gross subscription revenue. Subtract the platform's cut, typically around 10%. Subtract payment processing fees. Subtract whatever the writer spends on an editor, social promotion help, or paid tools for research and distribution. What's left is a genuinely strong income, but it took years of weekly, largely unpaid writing to build the free audience in the first place. And it still depends on maintaining that same output indefinitely because newsletters with inconsistent publishing schedules see churn accelerate noticeably. This is where the math either works or doesn't. A newsletter isn't profitable per subscriber. It's profitable per year of consistent output, and there's no shortcut to accumulating that. So how does anyone build something durable out of this? The writers who turn newsletters into real, lasting income tend to share a few habits. They pick a genuinely narrow niche rather than trying to write broadly about a general topic, because the top-earning newsletters tend to serve a specific audience that feels like nobody else is serving them as well. They build the audience somewhere else first. A podcast, social media, or an existing professional reputation, and treat the newsletter as the high-margin monetization layer on top, rather than trying to build an audience from scratch inside the newsletter platform alone. They diversify revenue beyond subscriptions, layering in sponsorships, paid community access, or consulting work that a loyal newsletter audience naturally leads to. And they treat consistency as non-negotiable, publishing on a fixed schedule for years because the newsletters that plateau are disproportionately the ones that go quiet for a few months and lose momentum they never fully rebuild. In other words, the writers who make real money aren't really running a newsletter. They're running a small media and audience development business, where the email itself is just the final, highest margin distribution format for an audience built somewhere else through years of consistent work. A few more things worth knowing. Burnout is a real structural risk.